This is my sermon from Sunday, September 22nd, 2013. My text is from the Gospel according to Luke, chapter 16, verses 1 through 13. Then Jesus said to the disciples, "There is a rich man who had a manager, and charges were brought to him that this man was squandering his property. So he summoned him and said to him, 'What is this that I hear about you? Give me an accounting of your management, because you cannot be my manager any longer.' Then the manager said to himself, 'What will I do now that my master is taking the position away from me? I am not strong enough to dig, and I am ashamed to beg. I have decided what to do so that when I am dismissed as manager, people may welcome me into their homes.' So, summoning his master's debtors one by one, he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' He answered, 100 jugs of olive oil. He said to him, 'Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 50. Then he asked another, 'And how much do you owe?' He replied, 100 containers of wheat. He said to him, 'Take your bill and make it 80. And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of the light. And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes. Whoever is faithful in a very little is faithful also in much, and whoever is dishonest in a very little is dishonest also in much. If then you have not been faithful with the dishonest wealth, who will entrust to you the true riches? And if you have not been faithful with what belongs to another, who will give you what is your own? No slave can serve two masters, for a slave will either hate the one and love the other, or be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and wealth." I have vivid memories of my 7th grade math teacher, but not because of anything she did in the classroom. A couple of months into the school year, this math teacher was gone for a few days and was replaced by a substitute. I thought she was just sick at first, but after a couple of weeks of not seeing the original math teacher, it was obvious something was going on. One day, the principal of the middle school showed up and announced to us that our old math teacher wouldn't be back and that the substitute was going to be staying for the remainder of the school year. I found out later that this math teacher had also been the treasurer for the teachers' union. Apparently, something irregular had come up during an audit of the union's bank accounts, and my math teacher, who was the treasurer, happened to be out of town in Atlantic City at the time. It turned out she had embezzled something in excess of $10,000 from the teachers' union. The last time I saw her face, it was on television, and she was talking about gambling addictions. Apparently, managers and money handlers have always had a reputation as being dishonest. This might be a surprise for those of you who thought that the stereotype of managers as tyrannical, incompetent, or dishonest was a recent development. The Gospels feature a lot of stories about authority figures who misbehave in all kinds of ways. Today's story caught my attention because, at least at first, it sounds like something that could very easily happen today. There's an employer who has a manager who has mismanaged things so badly that the boss calls this manager into his office because he's been ratted out. The boss asks for an explanation and then tells the manager that he's going to get the axe. This much of the story is easy enough to follow. We're all familiar with managers who mismanage money. We're still recovering from a national and really a worldwide financial crisis brought on largely by the irresponsible management of large amounts of money. And like this particular manager, many of the culprits seem to have gotten away with it. That's what bothered me about this story when I read it. This manager has cost his employer what must be a very large amount of money, and rather than getting what's coming to him, he gets a compliment from the boss that he's failed so badly. Could Jesus really be instructing his disciples to mishandle their money and slack off at work like this? The parable begins to make sense when you realize that Jesus, as usual, isn't giving straightforward career or money management advice. He's more concerned with the relationship that we have with our money and what that relationship says about our relationship with God and with each other. Jesus says, "And I tell you, make friends for yourselves by means of dishonest wealth, so that when it is gone, they may welcome you into the eternal homes." And immediately the reader asks the question, is Jesus seriously recommending that we be dishonest? The manager gets complimented for being shrewd, and apparently he's not going to get fired. So maybe the point is that making yourself popular or wealthy by any means is commendable. The word that's being used here, though, isn't necessarily shrewdness. That same Greek verb is sometimes translated in the Bible as prudent or wise, not necessarily being good at manipulating people, but showing good judgment or discernment in knowing what your goal is and how to pursue it. I think that when Jesus talks about using dishonest wealth, he's not just talking about being dishonest with wealth, he's talking about wealth itself as being dishonest. It's kind of a maxim that wealth corrupts. They say power corrupts, but wealth does too. All you have to do is look at some of the CEOs that have been in the news recently if you need proof. In 1 Timothy chapter 6, Paul says, "For the love of money is a root of all kinds of evil." And this struck me because I always thought that it was money itself that was the root of all kinds of evil. But money itself isn't bad. Jesus had friends who were his benefactors that had money, as did Paul. Loving it, though, loving that money, pursuing it to the exclusion of all else, is what causes someone to become evil. And so we get to the counterpoint of the manager. He's mismanaged apparently a large amount of money, but he gets back in the boss's good graces by cutting some slack to the people that owe money to him and to the boss. And so what we see is that grace, that ability to make friends and forgive debts, is valued over keeping track of the bottom line. Where the manager could have been vindictive, after all, somebody had ratted him out. He cuts people slack instead. He forgives part of the debt, hoping to encourage a sense of fellowship and community so that when he got fired, he'd have somewhere to go. And so wealth that can be so treacherous and dishonest and consuming can be used as an expression of grace rather than a means, rather than its own end. This emphasis on grace coming up in concrete ways and community building is a major theme in Luke. Jesus consistently emphasizes the difference between the way that his followers approach the world and the way that other people approach the world. Jesus says, "And his master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. For the children of this age are more shrewd in dealing with their own generation than are the children of the light." No doubt, the children of this world, the children of this age, are very shrewd about pursuing their ends and getting what they want at all costs. Try missing a car payment or losing a credit card bill. Suddenly your phone will be ringing off the hook. Jesus tells us that we're to be just as shrewd and persistent in understanding what it is that we stand for and how that affects everything that we do. As children of the light, we're asked to exercise grace. Acting shrewdly or wisely really means knowing that God's kingdom is important and that money, rather than an end in itself, is a means to pursuing grace and community. And it's not just with money that we're to do this. Jesus tells us that we are to make friends and to help one another. He reminds us implicitly that we all owe God a debt that we can't repay, that's been forgiven. And so we're to forgive each other's debts as well. Rather than just looking out for what's coming to us, we're to value relationships, building one another up, seeking God rather than seeking the bottom line. People often have a lot of trouble with this, even in the church. We're quick to remember slights, to want to lash out at someone who's different, to focus on the bottom line even at church, to count the money rather than look for ways that the money we have can be used to help those who don't have it. There's an encouragement in this passage to put money in its proper place and to use it and any other resource we have as a means for reaching out into the world around us with grace, letting others know that we've been forgiven and they have been forgiven as well. Amen.